Now, every startup is different. They're usually addressing different problems, focused on different sets of people, and have their own version of what it means to be super successful. Although, each startup is different and the product is different, the principles of building a successful product is probably the same. And today I have Malvika with me to chat about what does it mean to build an MVP for a startup in its really early and nascent stage. Thank you for joining me, Malvika.
Thank you, Shalini. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
So you've been a product leader. You've been working with different stages of a startup as well as corporate, right? And you've been through several waves of MVP and different stages of working at a product, right? But often there is this common terminology that we all come across, which is about building a lean startup. So, or a lean product. So, can you, or a lean MVP? So, can you tell us a bit about what does a lean MVP mean?
Sure. A lean MVP, it is a term which is it is a term on which the Silicon Valley runs, and it is a philosophy which was popularized by Eric Rice. But it is something that Y Combinator or any of the bigger accelerators, it is something that they promote within their portfolio companies. And it is very important because building a startup or building a product is not linear. It has been proved via Agile that being much more flexible in terms of taking your product to market is extremely important. And there's a lot of learnings which happen, which when you take a product to market. And this is the ethos of the lean MVP. This essentially means that when you have an idea, you really narrow down to what is the bare minimum your product or your service or your startup will for. And then you take it to market, you test it out with users, and using data or even qualitative feedback that you get from your users, you reiterate on that idea. So that is what essentially the lean MVP stands for.
Yeah, because often I think there's this philosophy of build fast, fail fast, or build fast and break fast, right? So that you can iterate and move on, right? So in your experience or observation, can you name one startup that followed these principles really well and eventually became successful?
Oh, absolutely. Our beloved WhatsApp. If you look at it, WhatsApp solved only one specific or started with solving one specific use case for its users, and that was cross border communication. And this was way back in 2009, 2010, where we didn't have so many methods of communication between, and like having lived in US, those calls that I would make buying those phone cards are still very, very fresh in my mind. So this is what WhatsApp really narrowed down into, is that how do we enable this cross-border communication, and their growth is it belongs to the history books of startups, and how they could achieve that growth, and of
Yeah.
course being acquired by Facebook with just less than 20 people in their team.
Yeah. That's definitely a fabulous story to remember. Now, typically when we talk about MVP, right? How long does one actually take or should take to build this out? Is it because YC and famous startups? Startup accelerators normally say, hey, it should be out in a couple of weeks. Do you think that's the right time? How long do you think one startup at starting very early stage should take to get their MVP out?
Yeah, so there is no good answer to this because it does depend on startup to startup. But I think what typically I see, not only just startups, but also within building new products within large companies, is the fact that people don't narrow down or hone in on the problem that they are solving. And sometimes there are a lot of assumptions that are actually made around the problem. So, first and foremost, is to have like complete understanding of the problem and of your users. This doesn't mean that you have to spend 1 year researching your target customers, or you get frustrated when you have not spoken to X number, and there's like, people do throw around some numbers about how many people, how many customers that you have to speak with. But at least having enough conversations to have a complete understanding. And let's not underestimate how much time this takes. Nobody owes us anything, and to get people to talk to you, it requires a lot of creativity on the part of the founders as well. So first and foremost is having very clear understanding of the problem that you're solving for, and based on that, seeing how can you test out whether your solution will actually work. So I have known founders who have gotten client commits just on a deck, nothing else. And of course, like, would love to hear your experience raising money as well. I have met founders who have launched something in 2 weeks using an existing like products in the market, and making a like integrating different products in the market. So, and there are of course people who work on things for years together, and these are also the more of the deep tech startups, which does require that much of time to actually launch a product. So there's no answer, but the question always is that how do you validate whether you are solving a real problem or not? And that is that problem validation. With people should be extremely focused in getting an answer to that, and experimenting to getting an answer to that at least within, I would say, a quarter, 3 months to 6 months of committed time in validating your solution, if that's a fit to the problem that you're solving. That is good enough of a time to know that whether your solution will work.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I totally agree with you, because one of the things that we've also noticed is, I try to do my own startup as well, right? While a lot of things may seem very obvious at the beginning, we always know that you're never building it for all, right? You can never be building for everyone. I mean, having a vision for everyone is great, but yet you need to start small. And often I think we also do fall into the trap of believing that your MVP is really special and you need to cater to everyone and satisfy everyone's need and so on, and it is not necessarily true, right? Having that laser sharp focus on who's your first customer is very, very important. So, Malika, this brings me to my next question. So, what are the 2 3 mistakes that founders make at the MVP stage?
Oh, absolutely. This is exactly what you had, started out with, is that you can't build for everyone. You have to really narrow down your focus on a certain customer segment. And again, that is easier said than done. If it was so easy, then every startup would be extremely successful. There is a reason why 9 out of 10 startups fail. And there are ways to go about it. A lot of times you will have a view of your customer segment, but as you go deeper and have those conversations and try to validate your ideas with them, you'll find that your customer segment is actually someone else, and that is perfectly okay. So it's very important for founders to both be focused, but at the same time have an open mind. Let us not They should not discount insights that they are getting from each of these conversations, and see how they can refine their idea better. So that is number one. Like, being too married to the idea is not a good place for especially for a founder or founders who have not found product market fit. And the second thing is that sometimes, even when you're building like B2B companies, a lot of times people over index on the feedback of just one or two customers. These customers are also your first customers, but at the same time, it's equally important to at least continue to have conversations with a variety of different customer segments or different use cases, to see which of these is the ones that your solution will fit to, or are the ones that you really want to solve as well. At the end of the day, you live with the problem day in and day out. If solving the problem doesn't excite you, then there's no point in doing that startup.
Yeah, yeah. I think there is this famous example that I know of, which is, Airbnb. First of all, they were like part-time people who were building this, and when they were building out their MVP, I believe that they did not have a payment feature. Okay, they only had a listing feature, where anybody could go list properties that they wanted to rent out, right? I mean, if I had a house, I could just go put it on Airbnb. Now the customer, when they come, they would actually obviously know what is available and what dates are available, but the transaction, the financial transaction, was not actually happening on Airbnb. It was still done physically between the two parties, right? And they did not build out the payment feature on day one because they didn't think that was a requirement. Now obviously they, it would have taken longer time for them to launch it, right, for completely building that integrated platform. And it still worked out, right? And I think it still worked out, understanding what is the core problem. Finding the place was the problem that they were solving for, and transaction was still happening, but it was happening directly between the two parties. Yeah, that was one of my learnings as well, that you don't have to build all the features on day one.
Absolutely. And this also goes to, I can talk on and on about startups. I'm so passionate about it. But just taking this very example, they found when they launched this product as a part of Y Combinator, what they found was that there was low traction, in the sense that people were not booking the homes. And when they dug deep, they also found that it was because they didn't have photos. So this is how the discovery happens. And but being focused on the problem, and as well as have keeping an open mind, is very important. It's again easier said than done, but that insights that you get, or even for that matter how Slack came into play, it was like almost an offshoot of a game that the founders were building. So again, keeping an open mind, and as well as experimenting and looking at data as to what customers are doing, not doing, is extremely important. Sorry, Shalini, you're on mute.
So as an investor, one of the things that that we see, right, in very early stages of investing itself is, especially at the MVP stage, right? I mean, that's the stage that I normally invest when I angel invest and so on. So one of the things that we look for is, how much understanding does the founder have of the customer that he's building for, right? It's so important that they, eat, sleep, breathe, or stalk their customers, right? And it is so important that they have a deep insight, because when they're raising money, they have like so much, they have just a very little room to play around, and build for the customer. So having a laser sharp focus on who you're building for, and why you're building for them, and how is it actually solving for their convenience or whatever it is, right? I think having that deep understanding is very important even when we invest. So because there's only so much that you can see at the MVP stage when they're building. So yeah, I think that's from an investor's lens. When someone's building for MVP, that's something that we look for in founders.
Absolutely. And what mistakes, as an investor, what are your red flags when you have founders pitch their ideas to you? And what are the green flags as well? And you mentioned one, but are there others too?
Um, yeah, absolutely. I mean, one is, of course, the green flags is having a good idea of who their first customers are, and what is the basic MVP or the product features that they're building to solve for that customer itself, right? That is something that's very very important at a early stage. The other mistakes that, I wouldn't say they're not necessarily red flags, but I think the amount of stress that everyone thinks that their idea is so special that they want to build out for all their features and put it out, right? I just gave this example of Airbnb, right? Or even the amount of stress that they put on their launch day, saying, "Oh, my launch day is coming, and I have to have like these 30 things in place." And when you actually look back, right? I mean, who remembers, say, Google's launch day or even Flipkart's launch day? We don't remember these launch days, right? I think it's about building it out slowly and testing it out with the right customers and getting feedback, and not put so much stress on making everything so perfect, and giving it out, in the best avatar possible. It's not necessary that it has to be that way. It is not, your MVP is not that special. It's just that, just make sure it is working and it is solving for your customer and correct feedback, right? So I would say, these are my quick observations, because everybody falls in love with their product so much that they're like, trying to get the best version of it out, and a lot of time goes away.
I completely agree with you on that. There is a time value, there's a money value to time, and there is a money value to launching quickly versus delaying the launch for the perfect product. And what advice would you give for people raising at MVP stage?
So one is of course having the clear understanding of the customer itself, right, and the basic features of the product that you're building. Have clear clarity on that. And then of course when you're fundraising, it's very a lot of people miss out on the key insights that they have collected on why they're building it, and they directly jump into the TAM and SAM and all of that, right? It is sometimes it's as basic as why are you building this and why is this important today. Is this a good to have versus a must have, right? And having basic answers and clarity on that is very important, because at the end of the day, it could be a paper napkin idea, right? I mean, you've not necessarily built it. So it's important that you have very clear focus and your ability to communicate it itself, right? Especially when people are fundraising, they assume that the investor or the other person knows as much as they do, right? And they really need to sort of just go back to basics and be able to communicate the vision very very clearly, and why it's important today. And then from there on go into the market metrics and all the vanity metrics and so on. But it's important that you get your base right. So um so this is great, Malvika. I think, do you have any quick to dos or not to dos for people building out their product for their startup?
So my quick feedback, or rather, what I would guidelines that I follow myself is that first and foremost is focus on your customer, focus on your customer segments because typically they will be many, and test quickly. And most importantly is also put those thoughts on the paper. A lot of times when there are observations, a lot of them are in our mind, but we are not able to thread them together unless we write it down. Or sometimes it so having a observation and having a recording mindset, especially in the early stage, is extremely important.
Great. So I think our minds definitely meet with that. I think both of us are saying customers, 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 right? Have like a clear understanding of your customer. So I think that's a great takeaway for everyone. And I'm glad that we are actually doing the first MVP Unlocked program next week for women entrepreneurs who are at their idea stage and looking to build their MVP. And for those of you who want to check out the MVP Unlocked program, you can find the link in the comment in the description below. And I look forward to working with all you guys on building your MVP product. And thank you so much, Malvika, for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Shalini, for having me on the live stream. It was my pleasure.
Thank you.